we're trying to make this session as interactive and easygoing as possible. We are easygoing guys. You'll see us smile a lot, joke a lot. So please, you got a question, raise your hand and ask that question as we're going. We'll have a Q&A in the midsection and at the end, but as we're going, pop your hand up and we can ask those questions. Brief history about myself. Little guy from the Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth. Moved to Cape Town in the 90s. Welcome, Eastern Cape. I had zero intention of joining the film industry. I had no idea that it was around. I had no idea that there was a viable career within film. So, and I think that will resonate with a lot of you. I did my accounting and I found accounting easy in school. So auditing was the easy go-to, I would say. In my final years of studies, I started working in a small small accounting firm, and they placed me at a client, which was, I guess, my luck. The client's name was Two Oceans Productions, a German film production company in Cape Town, and that's where I found my liking to film. I like that the raw nature of it all. It felt a bit like a circus. Circus comes to town, puts up its tents, gets a show going, and then they leave again. Off they go and to another location. And I like that hustle and bustle of it all. And when I joined the industry, I had my accounting degree, and I started off in what we would call, I guess, the lower levels of accounting. Started doing petty cash, bookkeeping, and I found my niche in payroll. I like that continuous run around the mall every week or every month. You've got to run, and it was I found it interesting. As they would say, the rest is history, because 3 years later I found myself in Moonlighting Films, running the payroll division, and we started a company called RealPay. 15 years later, and RealPay, I would say, is one of the best film production payroll companies in South Africa. RUDI might contest because
you're one of the best.
You're one of the best. I've since moved on from RealPay, but it's now run by an all-woman team of people that I've worked with for the past few years, and that's why I find it important that you must keep attention to who's in your room. These people might be with you for many years to come. We might be called independent contractors or seen as independent people, but a team is very important in the film industry. So please, my wife has got a nice saying, be careful about the toes that you step on today. They might be attached to the ass that you have to kiss tomorrow. So careful there, let's play nice. Myself and RUDI go back to 2018, 2008. Nearly 20 years of we worked together on a production or series called Crusoe, where RUDI was the production accountant and I was the little payroll guy. And look at us now. So a little indication that anything is possible in this industry. Would you like to give us a brief intro about yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hi guys, I'm RUDI, Managing Director of Film Africa Entertainment. Before I start, I just wanted to know who we're talking to here. And first question would be, who is studying or has studied some form of qualification in accounting? If I can see a raise of hands. There we go. And who of you guys have worked in the film industry in whatever capacity? Okay, there we go. Obviously not happy in the departments they're currently working in. All right, so as I said, I'm RUDI. I was born and raised in a small town called Grabo, or Elgin for the posh people, which is just over the mountain from Somerset West. I studied accounting after school. I wasn't an academic giant. I crammed my 3-year course into 4 years. I then...
Oh, the same, by the way.
Okay, yeah, you need to take your time to just get to grips with all the fundamentals. And then after that, I did get a job as a stock controller at a fruit export company after many months of searching, basically counting crates and boxes. It was exhilarating. And obviously then decided that the little savings I had, I bought a plane ticket and I went to London to go and see what it looks like in England. and I did get a temp job there in accounting, but it was okay. You know, you like payroll, I hate routine. So to me, accounting routine at that level of as a junior is a bit too much. So then I heard about a job, an opening at the BBC where they were looking to train accountants to become film production accountants. And I was successful in the application, and it was quite a baptism of fire. You understand the accounting side of things, but the title's got two almost definitions within it, production and accounting. And learning about production, as I said, was a baptism of fire, and understanding how everything slotted in and how you were part of a team. And the intent was to do that for 2 years, and I ended up staying in the UK for 10 years, 8 years at the BBC, and then 2 years as a financial controller at a film production company. I learned a lot, and I saw a lot of the world because it gave opportunity to travel, to work specifically on projects that weren't just London-based, but in other countries. And it also allowed me to expand my network beyond the UK into Europe and America, North America, including Canada. And then again, life-changing decision, missed the family too much and moved back to South Africa in 2008, where I got the gig of production accountant on Crusoe, which was a nightmare of a show. Everyone still remembers it, but it wasn't our fault, was it?
No.
Anyways, and after that, joined Film Africa as financial controller, and 15 years later, I'm the managing director.
So when we think South African film industry, over the past decades, we have been doing very well. We are regarded, or if I think 10 years ago, we were regarded as one of the best. That has gone down a bit because of various matters, DTI being one of them, unfortunately.
It took 5 minutes to get us there.
Yeah, it's a big sticking point. But we still have a good name out there. They love our locations. You could shoot 20 different locations in Cape Town, and you wouldn't know that you were in Cape Town. We've got so many diverse locations, so many beautiful beaches, mountains, you name it. So the internationals love that. Our local and international sector is doing very well at the moment. They love our crew. By working with internationals, as with RUDI, by working with internationals, we gain a lot in our sector. We gain a lot of experience and know-how from the internationals as well. So our crew is a very strong element of our industry. And hopefully you guys are going to be part of that crew one day, where we could say these guys were juniors once upon a time, but look at them now, internationally known as quality crew. The dollar does help with our exchange rate, in that it's a bit cheaper for the internationals to come and shoot here, which is a good sticking point for us. I think when we think film, we think about the 90 minutes that you see on screen. And I can assure you that there is a long process that goes on before and after that. If you think about the life cycle of a project, from development through to green light, pre-production, post-production, and distribution, there's probably only one sector that plays a part in all of those roles. Yes, in development, you would start with your script, but there's no film that's going to get off the ground, or no project that's going to get off the ground without a financial plan of some sort. So the accountant is in there ready from the get-go. We play an important part in terms of getting that project off the ground, in terms of planning the finances, and then also tracking those finances throughout the project. Your producers would want to know where they stand in terms of wherever they're on the production, where are we, and are we able to finish with the cash that we have on hand? I guess we would just call it in accounting just basic cash flow and budgeting. Would you want to chat any more about the project life cycle?
I just wanted to add to that, you know, I was taught an underspend, coming in under budget is as bad as coming in over budget. And that's why the financial planning and forecasting is so critical, because if you have money left, that could have gone on screen. That could have made your film so much better. So that's why the planning of getting to spending that last, I won't say cent, rand, means that you've applied everything you could on screen, and throughout the monitoring and forecasting of that expenditure is also to avoid wasteful expenditure. When we say on screen, is what you actually see at the end on screen, instead of having very expensive lunches that doesn't end up on screen. So it's the whole financial management that contributes so greatly to the success of a project.
Yeah, thank you. And when we talk about a project, this is the typical team structure. Obviously, depending on the size of your project, we could have a one-day shoot, or you could have some project that lasts 5 or 6 years to make. So this is a typical example of what a team structure would look like. And again, there's one role that will play a part with most departments within that structure, and that's again accounting. So you always kind of got your finger in some kind of a pie within the film industry.
Yes, it's together with the producers. And just back on the life cycle is that the accountant and the producer, they're kind of first in and last out, right? And together with the producers is one of the few departments who has this whole overview of the production. You could be sitting in a department that's integral to the success of the project, but they don't see anything outside of their department. Whereas with the producers department and accounts department, you're basically just overseeing everything, and you're supporting every other department. That's also, yes, there's an element of auditing, there's financial control and management, but it's also a support department, because your designer gets allocated a certain budget. You're tracking the cost of it, and you can support them by saying, okay guys, but actually you still have a bit more left, so you can make that set even prettier. And by having that whole overview, you can make sure that all departments are looked after, because it's one big family at the end of the day. It's not an us and them kind of scenario.
And that's something we're tussling with a lot, trying to let teams understand that it's not just there's a production team and there's an accounts team. This is a team effort.
Yeah.
And that's important to remember.
What's more about the structure?
Yeah, nothing much more about the structure. Do you have any questions so far? Are you guys still with us?
Yay. There's only one con to it, but it's a potential con.
Yeah.
So the career in it, and if we're looking at it predominantly, as Lyndon touched upon, you're an independent contractor. You're working from project to project. But it does give you growth prospects that if you have the right foundation, and we'll get to the characteristics of a successful accountant, you can grow pretty rapidly. But it's all about how many questions you're asking and how much you're taking on board, almost like a sponge. And so the growth prospects exist. And if one sets out your own career development plan and you stay on target with that, you will grow quite rapidly within that discipline. It's a transferable skill. You can have, and we've seen that with various team members in accounts departments, people who have worked in other industries. They've got the fundamentals. They can come and work on a production in the accounts department. And from their experience in the accounts department, they can move into corporate if the project career isn't of that much interest. People's personal circumstances change. I used to love working on a project per project per project because I knew it would end eventually. But also it's exciting because then you get to start a new project and you get to travel. We were talking about that. I think, yes, opportunity to travel as well, is that a lot of our accountants travel abroad, work on projects abroad in Europe, America, Australia, North Africa. So you get to see the world. But at some point you might decide you've seen enough of it, or for personal reasons you want to settle down. It doesn't mean that you have a limited shelf life. You can transfer that skill into a corporate environment, or basically pick and choose what you want to do if you're in demand and highly experienced.
Let's have a chat about salaries in the various industries when we talk about corporate to
Yes.
to freelance.
So, and in general industries or across the board, I mean, I stand to be corrected, but if you're a trainee working on a project, if you're an intern, right, in various industries, you'd get a 3,800 rand stipend a month. If you're a trainee in the film industry, you get 3,500 rand a month. I should know this, right?
A week.
A week?
That's a difference.
Can I apply? You get 3,500 rand a week. So that's quite a difference. It is because of the nature that it's project-based nature instead of continuing. But all of that gives you a good indication of where you end up as you grow through your career. You know, as a financially apt person, you would understand also that some projects is only for a month, some are for 18 months, and you'd have to, you know, plan your personal finances accordingly. Yeah. But it is financially quite rewarding. I'm not going to talk about the top end scale because that just depresses me personally.
Rudy, I just want to say that I don't want people to get too excited because your entry level would be 2.5K a week.
Okay.
But you would it would advance from 2.5 to 3.5 during the course of your traineeship before you'd become crew.
Mm.
Okay, but that's 2.5 times more than a general kind of industry internship.
So now, I've been fortunate enough that I've been in the film industry for such a long time, but I've never been a freelancer, per se. I've always been attached to a production service company where I've had a full-time position. I've never had to manage my finances to say, I'm going to be without work for the 6 months of the year. What do I do now? I mean, you've been there before. Mm-hmm. So it's... That was, I would say, is one of the cons of the freelance nature, that you've got to be on your toes when it comes to understanding the fact that I might not have work for the next few months. So I'm managing that. I'm tussling with that on a regular basis. Do I give that up and say I want something more permanent and I want to be focused and have a monthly salary that I know is coming in, or do I take this chance and kind of go for it and manage my life better and see how far that can go? I think, do we have some freelancers in the audience? I see, oh, hello. I know some faces over there. I mean, I have a chat with Nadima and Anati over there at the back, and they can give you some information about how tricky that can be sometimes. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yes, it's interesting though, because there are a lot of freelance accountants who, not for love nor money, would want to take a Monday to Friday job. They're just used to the project approach. They're strong in networking as well, because that's the other thing. You're your own business. You're your own entrepreneur. So you need to make sure that you secure that future revenue stream on an ongoing basis by working. We spoke about the opportunity to travel. Project-based. This was a personal upside for me, because by the time you get fed up with your colleagues, the show's over and you meet new people and you get on with it. But also there's a beginning and an end to it, and you kind of go at 1,000 miles an hour to get it done. And the reward of seeing that final project and that you were part, or that final product, and that you were part of that team who made that happen. Mm. And we discussed the con.
We kind of have.
We kind of covered
the freelance nature of it. I mean,
yes.
Money might be better, but yeah, there's a bit more risk in terms of it's not as stable as a 9 to 5.
But it's like any industry where you have staff versus independent contractors or freelancers, there is a premium on the temporary nature of the engagement that you're getting paid. So you kind of, from a personal finance point of view, need to look at what is my yearly income and then work out your personal budget for that. Mm. I still can't get it right, but okay.
You and me both. The builder and his house is never built. Eh?
Yeah.
The importance of accounting, I mean, I'm sure that most of you should know the basics and the standards of accounting. We should have brought Rayma in for this one. Yeah. The importance of accounting, I mean, money makes the world go round. How's that for the first statement? I think that's a given. Every industry will have an accountant in it at some point, in some place. We did have a chat about budget maintenance. The importance, obviously, of accounting would be not just to record accounting records, but then to give your producer a snapshot idea as to where a project is in its life cycle. We are able to then report on a weekly basis, are you on track? How much more do you have left? Will you be able to finish with the money that you have on hand? I would say the difference between corporate accounting and film accounting is that your corporate accounting would have your standards, the trial balance, debits, credits, and all those. Film accounting is more cost accounting. You're not really going to be making sales on that side of things. You're there to spend the money. You've got a budget, you've got to spend the money, and you've got to make sure that you've got enough money to see you through that project. So that's a small difference between corporate and film accounting. And then yes, as we mentioned, this type of accounting it's not really that back office staff member. If I think corporate accounting, I often think about this guy sitting in the back office somewhere just crunching numbers, not seeing anyone in his little dark office. Film accounting is a bit more of a team effort, like we mentioned. You're working together with people on a regular basis, and you are an important cog of that team. So we always say, play nice. You're only as good as your last job, and people remember. People remember your attitude. People remember your work ethic. So it's a extremely your name is important in the film industry because people will remember that for the next show, and they remember the good and the bad. So let's keep that in mind. You don't want to be the one that's got the bad name for whatever reason. He shows up late or doesn't, or has a poor attitude or those kind of things. So keep you got to protect your name at all costs.
It's the brand you have.
It's the only brand you have as an independent contractor, correct?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on the importance of accounting? I mean, we could go far into the ethics and all those kind of things.
Yes, but I think we can cover that on the next slide. I think it's just also understanding the balance between the constant auditing and validating expenditure, asking why, so that you can tell the decision makers why certain things can and can't happen, and just being able to communicate that. But I'm going into the characteristics now and ethics.
Very important.
You can have any law in the world governing something, if you have the moral compass and you have the ethics, which includes work ethic, which includes knowing what's right or wrong, which includes sometimes you're not just sharing good news, but also bad news. If you see something going off track, then it's your responsibility to get it to communicate so that it gets back on track. And if your ethical base is strong, then you're pretty much covering all the other bases in there. Do you want to cover the slide, or am I covering?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of it. We spoke about attitude and aptitude.
Yeah.
Technical skills. I mean, this is can go wide. I mean, I find that I was lucky with my experiences. Back in the 90s is when computers came out, so we were all into computers, and that gave me a nice base to be technologically advanced, I guess, for an accountant, yeah. But then, your different courses that you do, Excel, movie magic budgeting, all these different assets build you build yourself, and these are the type of skills that pushes you further within the industry. So I would appeal you to please learn as much as you can, do as many courses as you can. These kind of workshops are important to learn, and those kind of things will set you up to go far in this industry. I mean, when we think about technical skills, I mean, accounting is the one thing that obviously helps in this industry. But I would also note that it's not a minimum requirement to have an accounting degree to be in the accounts department in the film industry, which is something different to corporate. I mean, obviously we love the idea that you do have an accounting degree, but it's not a be-all and end-all if you don't. You can learn your skills otherwise, on the job, learning various packages. So learn as much as you can to kind of push your career as far as you can.
I mean, on technical skills as well, and I do that a lot, including with us preparing this presentation, is, the help functions, the online resources, if, working on Word, for example, and trying to get stuff done to to work on it more effectively is you've got so many online resources available of watching a quick video on it. If you think about, we refer to movie magic budgeting, which is like the global industry standard budgeting tool. It's a software. There are no courses that one can attend. Everything's available online. There used to be in the old days, but not anymore. Now everything's available online. And as you learn about the modules, you watch those online tutorials. So those things are not, I'm a big fan of kind of modular learning, that instead of going into full-time learning, to when I have a moment, I want to learn something new. And it could take 5 minutes or it could take an hour, but all those resources are readily available. And you just immediately feel the impact of that becoming more efficient, more effective in what you're doing.
I like that. And a lot of it's free as well, when we say online. So go for it.
Just make sure you get quality videos, not my videos. But no, it's free, yes, because that used to be a huge barrier of being able to afford a course for movie magic budgeting, as an example again, or a Microsoft Office course. Things were prohibitively expensive.
Now you can jump into YouTube and get it for free.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so make use of that.
Can I speak about communication and understanding? I think, again, I used to dread having to communicate a forecast that was unfavorable. That used to be my euphemism for an overspend, an unfavorable variance, because you feel like you're the bearer of bad news and you are going to be slapped for it. If you don't communicate it, that's where the problems kick in. If you don't raise the issues or challenges that the production is financially facing, then there can't be any decisions made to remedy that or to take a different direction. And with some people, not some people, a lot of creative people don't want to really understand, oh, it's just numbers. But if you could put those numbers into a story, which is critically important, then they understand and they start relying heavily on you in a conversation. Would go, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You can quite easily default to no, 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 or you can say yes and. Yes, but is a no. So you can say yes and you can apply your mind in how you can contribute to it. And then, before you know it, you are friends with creatives and not a fear of, there's no fear of communicating with them, because it's for their best interest, it's for the project's best interest. So communication is critical, but one also needs to understand where people are coming from and why they're making certain decisions. And by understanding that, you can then also communicate better and provide a better service to the entire production.
And when we say understanding, we're talking, you're reading all of your call sheets, you're reading your DPR.
Read the script.
Read the script, it's a good
There are
place
a lot
to
of
start.
accountants who don't. Go to set. I was forced to go to set for 4 hours twice a week, because then you understand what's happening. If you just see an invoice for, 2 million rands worth of timber, the big difference between seeing that and going to actually see where it went and why you spent that money and understanding, wow, this is a set. And then you're also more excited about it because you're part of something. So yes, the call sheets, what's going to happen tomorrow, the progress reports, what happened yesterday, reading all of that will help you forecast better I once asked that silly question because I didn't look at the schedule, was like, can we release this allowance for cranes now? And then the producer just showed out the window, all the cranes standing there. They still need to be paid, So if you understand the whole production schedule, then you can contribute better to it and not feel isolated.
I like that you say you should go into set. That was my aha moment. Sitting in accounting and I get an invoice for pencil. And the invoice was, I think, a couple of 100,000 rand. I was like, what? For one pencil? And I go to set, and we were working on a film called The Borrowers, where we had tiny people running through a house, and the pencil was the size of the studio roof. and it made sense to me. It clicked. I understand. And that was just because you understood your industry a bit better. So get more involved, get to sets, as Rudy said, read the call sheet, read the script. These are all things that fit together to make you a better team member, not just an accountant. Okay. Attention to detail speaks for itself.
Does it?
Yeah. So little time in the day, I think, to do that, I guess.
I mean, it's to me, it's always been critical because if you get the detail wrong, you know, some people will say the devil's in the detail as an excuse for it, but it is actually in that detail. And getting the detail right means you only have to do it once. And again, as I said, I'm quite lazy. I only want to do stuff once. But also, if you get the detail wrong, it can just snowball into a massive issue and something that is much more difficult to go and remedy. So checking and double checking is like, it's a bit, what do they call OCD of me, but even my emails have got a minute delay because I click send and then I go and read it again. So just that detail will also make communication better, you know, that everybody understands what you're presenting. So checking and double checking is what it's all about. I do want to jump back to attitude.
No problem.
With an example of attitude. You could have technically highly capable accountants, but I've always found that the accountants that may be lacking in the traditional technical skills, but who have the right attitude, who are getting up and go, how can I help you today? What can we do today? What can I learn today, right? And asking questions. Even just randomly asking people what they do for a living. People love to talk about themselves, so they're going to tell you what they do, and that helps you learn more about it. And we have always been hugely supportive of those individuals with the right attitude who want to grow. Then the technical skills can come with it. Or, listen, I'm an accountant, I know nothing about production, but I want to learn. That's somebody I'm going to give an opportunity to, because they truly want to learn about the production element of accounting. So attitude is very important to me, certainly.
Thank you.
Software knowledge we touched on with regards
we
to.
did, yes.
But if you guys also have questions about that kind of software knowledge, we can also, you know, it's one thing to say go and find it online, but we could also take a look at what are the appropriate ones and what opportunities there are or options there are available.
Yeah.
Just one quick question. Many of the people here, you talked about teamwork and cross-sector skills, but can you just very briefly talk to the people who are not on massive multi-million-dollar productions, but who might want to take many of the skills that are required and use them in a short film or in a smaller production or kind of on 48 hours film festival or things that they're kind of doing, the value of what it is you're offering to those people?
I'll be shot for this, but listen, where I learned about production accounting and the different skills were actually I started in BBC children's drama. It was very dramatic, with basically where the Teletubbies, do you guys know the Teletubbies? And in the night garden,
I still watch it.
that played on evil loop in our offices constantly, 24/7. And the budgets were minute, right? Really, really tiny. And I had to learn everything so I was the assistant production accountant, though there wasn't a production accountant. And I was doing everything from petty cash to the financial forecasting. And I think it's a great place to learn, but also it was actually more challenging than working in these big Hollywood shows, you know, because you've got to be kind of master of all, right? You have to know exactly what each department does, and you're engaging with everyone. You're not just sitting in this room of 200 people that you don't even know half of their names of. So, I mean, from from that point, that skill then is easily transferable into big projects, but also the other way around is that you could then apply all the knowledge you learned on a big project to go and apply that on a smaller budget project. On a, you know, the only thing that would be that I would just simply die is if you made me do some kind of outside broadcast or live show that I can't do. But you could apply the skills vice versa. I am actually always very keen to see somebody who has actually, you know, written the theme tune, sang the theme tune, post-produced the theme tune, than somebody who's just very, very siloed.
And that's where you get your experience.
That's right. That's right. So does that answer the question, Seaton?
Yeah, just one other thing that you talked about cross-sector skills and the teamwork factor. Many of these young people are still hopeless romantics, so they're looking at themselves ultimately as producers and directors. But also just touch on the value of what it is you're speaking to, the cross-sector skills, which really inform so many other roles on a production. I mean, even if you're working on locations, whatever, it all involves accounting. It all actually involves mini accounting kind of worlds, so to speak. So just touch on that cross-sector skills, how you can take this and use it in so many other areas.
I think, as we said, money makes the world go round. So every department will have some feature of finance inside of it. Like you say, the location manager is going to go outside, he's going to go find a location, he's going to get a contract from that location, he's going to get deposits he has to do on that location, payments on a regular basis. So his accounting team is going to have to guide him through that process. The same, you can mention any department within Film and the accounts department is there. What's nice is you could then also take your accounting skills and go work in those departments, mind you, as well. We find a lot of accountants that have worked in producers. Is a good example, actually. A good base to have is an accounting base to then become that producer. But I bet you're not going to find a location manager that's going to become an accountant very, very easily. So the cross doesn't always go both ways. But accounting is a good base.
My name is Matthew. I work as a producer in the industry, and I'm here because I wanted to hear from you guys, just basically to try and get more of an insight into exactly what happens from an accounting perspective and just learn. And my question is, I would find it very interesting to hear from you guys on how you feel, what you feel the importance is between the direct relationship between the producer and the accounting and the production accountant, and when that starts going south, what do you do about it?
Well, firstly, I'll say the most important relationship in the production is your producer, your line producer, and your accountant. The two together are inseparable. And when you've got issues, that's a mega problem. I'm sure you've had tough producers before. I've had tough producers before, and sometimes you have to work your way through that. Unfortunately, there's not often a scenario where you can say, oh, I don't like him, I don't want to work with him anymore. Either you leaving or he's leaving, and a good chance he's not going to be leaving. So it's a tricky one to navigate. There again comes your attitude and your communication, your personal skills. And we said, you're only as good as your last job. I can assure you, you might see yourself through this production, but you won't be working with that producer again for the next one. And that's a shame for both parties. So it's as a tricky to navigate.
I have had practical experience, and there's different kind of struggles that happen, right? It could be purely personality, which makes it very difficult. Personality clashes. What I've done with that historically was find out what the other party, what they're passionate about. Anything outside of your industry. Basic human manipulation. You need to cut that. But, and just show an interest in their lives to build up that relationship. Then that's a personality clash. It could be most of the time that I struggle to get on with somebody is because they remind me too much of myself. And, you're at loggerheads. If it's a professional struggle, it depends on what environment you're in, because it's like in any work environment where there is a hierarchy And if you find, because sometimes you find people are hiding information, and I'm using various examples here. You could be, you're doing forecasts, your producer needs to sign it off to a higher power, and they refuse to sign off a negative forecast. That's a tricksy one. I've had that before, and it was basically, you got until the next forecast is published to communicate this, or I have to. That's not great. Did I ever work with them again?
No.
But we're still friends. But I don't know if that's answering your question. That's a kind of a hierarchy technical thing. Because again, this producer was very afraid of sharing bad news, right? Personality one is show an interest in the person and get over yourself. And
At the end of the day, the money is the most important thing. Is you can't go. I mean, you know, if you end up going way over budget, then that's a problem. And you know, who becomes accountable for that? Is it the production accountant or is it the producer? And if you see that the producer is moving in a direction where it's getting very dangerous, at that point, are you able, I mean, can you assume control, or not control, but can you then override decisions that the producer has made?
It depends on the client.
yes, it depends on whose money it is the answer to that. If it's a bonded show, then the bond companies speak to the accountant. First thing that you have to do as an accountant is make sure you can rely on the integrity of the numbers. And there's a lot of effort that goes into that to show you where you are now so that you're able to forecast from there. Because the integrity of the numbers aren't always reliable if you don't have a strong team or you don't have a good working relationship with all the other departments, right? You might not be getting in those petty cashes, those purchase orders, invoices, those forecasts. So it's where are we now? If you're confident, and you have to make sure as an HOD that you're confident that that's where you are now, then whoever holds the purse strings ultimately is the one that you need to report to. Ideally, you do that in partnership with your producer or line producer. But I've seen also that with many studios, there's been a trend, some of them, where actually the line producer can't even work on the live movie magic budget. They work off a PDF. And that the financial controller is the one who runs through the forecast meeting. So that there's already, they're working with the line producer and the producer, but those guys don't have access to the actual software. So, yeah, I think probably, and when you have an independently financed film, then there's a bond company 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your question was who's head, who takes control in the scenario where it's breaking.
Yeah, I mean, I was just basically at the end of the day, if things go, I mean, obviously, when things go well, it's great. But when things don't go well, where does the responsibility ultimately lie?
I think it allows us to first put your hand up. That's the important one, communication. Communication with producers, like Rudy said, who holds the purse strings. But it will first come from us because, yeah, the producer will always want to, the producer got his own name to protect. He doesn't want to be in a scenario where he's coming to his higher power to tell them, sorry, I'm over. So he's gonna first try to not hide it, but first keep it to himself and try to fix the problem by making savings from other departments. And then he'll go and give the message once he has managed to fix that problem. But the accountant's role is first and foremost, let's notify the producers there is a problem.
If you want to know who gets fired, the one that keeps quiet.
Yeah.
The one that keeps quiet first. So I always liked, and I can use an example again, I think we had a policy that anything over, let's say, any variance from last week to this week's cost report, any variance over 10,000 Rand, you need to write why. Now you've moved 12,000 Rand from props purchased to props hired. Still need to just say you've moved it there. A dear friend of mine who's a very established financial controller, not in this country and no names named, I employed him on a show and he kept moving money around at 9,999 Rand, so he didn't have to write a reason. But what I actually liked seeing is the story. And we'll get to that when we get to the detailed stuff, but I think it's important to mention that. You can generate all these reports, trial balances, a cost report as we call it, which is actuals versus projections basically, and where you're sitting in relation to the budget. All of that, that's beautiful printing all that paper. What I want to see is a one-page story that's typed out in Word, and accountants hate doing Word, but typed out in Word. So tell me the story of all these numbers. I know all the banks are reconciled because you have proof of that. I know all the cents around it, up and not down. But tell me the story of where the show is right now.
And where it's going, where do we land?
Where it's going. What are you seeing happening? And even, yes, the cost report has some pressure points within departments, but also tell me that, listen, we're 2 weeks away from completing filming, but we have no weather cover. In other words, we have no scenes left to shoot indoors. So we could have a storm. So I have kept this pot of money there in case we have a storm and we can't film for the day. It's a random example, but anything that can happen, I'm not going to take that money from you, but I can see you've applied your mind in forecasting that there are potential risks and potential opportunities of savings. It just expands from just the normal numbers on a page. The numbers doesn't mean, it could mean anything. It's how you interpret it. And that's also why we have weekly cost report meetings, budget meetings, be it with our clients, be it with all the producers in the room, be it with a bond company, completion guarantor company. You have that on a weekly basis. So you don't come at the end and go, oops, because then nobody works after that. So this can be a team, an army of one, the production accountant or financial controller, or it can be an army of about 20. You can also have in specific departments, as we said earlier, official accountants. You could have a stunts accountant, you could have a construction accountant, you know, all those heavy spend items. But this is a general layout of it. And filing clerk trainees, just because we ran out of page space here, but you know, every single member, trainee, petty cash accountant, payroll, accounts payable, first assistant, integral part, and each has a role to play, of which we'll go down through the detail. And this could expand. We currently have a project where we have 15 people in the department, or as I said, it can go down to one person in a department.
It also depends on which stage of the production you're at.
Correct. Yeah.
So you could start your production with one, as we say, and we could build it up to 15 and then squeeze down again to 2 or 3 to finish it up.
That's right. Because if you're preparing a show, you don't necessarily need a payroll accountant for the first 2 weeks or a petty cash accountant because the volume's still low. There's a team of 5 people in the entire production, for example, and then as the production grows, the team will grow.
It fits in with our circus analogy. I'm building the tents, I'm getting all my crew in first, and then the big show starts. So that's when I need all my crew to be on hand, and then that tent goes down again, and I can reduce my staff again. Shall we dig into individually?
Let's dig it.
Let's dig it. We're starting from, I wouldn't say from the bottom, but from where you would build your skills. I mean, the trainee position. And this one we find is an important one. I mean, you might think that you're doing the menial jobs, but in this scenario is where you are learning about your trade. You're learning about who's doing what, who's signing off what, who's signing what, who's paying what. You're learning the terms of a camera operator and a gaffer or whatever that is. That's where you're learning the base of your knowledge within the industry. So some might see it as a low-level job, but this is good. This is where I started, mind you. Even with my accounting degree, that's where I started. And I found that it was a fantastic base to know what's what in the industry.
I think you also see more of what your colleagues are doing than if you, for example, in accounts payable, you don't see what a petty cash person's necessarily doing.
Yeah.
But when you're the trainee, you see what everybody within's doing, and as you said, what the rest of the production team's doing.
So yeah, so that's where you learn administration and support. It's like we said, it's a good starting place. Good starting place.
You said, I know what happens here. There's a very important job. It's, we have kind of cut down on cash in this world, but I think the term will remain, or the title will remain for a long time, because the cash has just taken a different format in the form of e-wallets and credit cards, etc., etc. But the control of it is critical. It's every person or authorized people on a production. And let's look at a smaller crew scale production where you might be giving the producer a petty cash allowance because they need to spend on some stuff, they need to buy things. You might not have all these big departments and stuff. I'm trying to just make it relevant to what Seaton was saying earlier. But let's say there's about 5 people who need money so that they can spend things with suppliers with whom you can't open an account, right? So you're going to
The market was a nice one.
market, yes, and there's a lot of vendors at the market. So you will be using that cash allocation that you have to buy stuff, get receipts, and we don't want people to spend their own money and then get reimbursed. So you would be handing out a float to each person. Here's your 5,000 Rand float. And that person comes back with all the valid receipts and a reconciliation. And then the petty cash accountant needs to audit that. They need to make sure that within the policy of the production, you're not buying stuff that you shouldn't be buying. For example, we have had cigarette procurement, but on a show where you had to buy cigarettes. So then that needs special permission. It gets flagged, and then it goes all the way to the producer to say, well, we need for this scene, we need a box of cigarettes, for example. And then I got to smoke it afterwards. But, no prohibited items, no, also looking at the reasonability of what the price level of the item is. And you would also do the value-added tax split out, which is very important. The person who got that petty cash, let's say in the costume department, might not know that they can claim VAT back on certain elements. So now they're recording on their budget that they've spent so much money, but they've actually spent less. So if you're doing the VAT breakdowns, then you know what the net cost is going to be, and you can communicate that back in reporting to the costume department to say, this is actually where you're sitting. You thought you were sitting higher up, but you haven't spent all your money yet. So it's a very important thing to do. And then once you've audited it, and if there were nobody else that needed to authorize it, that's the level of you needing to know the detail of that recon and reconciliation and the contents of it. Then you go and get your producer chain approval for that to be signed off, and you can turn over that float, which basically means, okay, you had a 5,000 Rand float, the person gave you 3,000 Rand worth of expenses, so you give them 3,000, so they're back to 5,000 again. Always struggled with that sum, but okay. Then that needs to get processed onto whatever accounting software is used, and you would print out those audit reports, which is a report like a batch of all these petty caches, and your accountant has looked at it and said, this is all fine, the coding's correct, so it's allocated in the right areas of the budget, and then you will post that so it pulls into the accounting system so you can generate your forecasts from that, or your cost reports. Per diem is another. Well, if you're shooting on location, let's say we're all driving out to Lanesburg and we're going to overnight there, then people get a subsistence allowance per diem. Isn't that just Latin for per day? I think so. Anyways, so, and you have to make sure that everybody that's going out there gets the right subsistence allowance paid for their length of stay there, right? So that they don't have to live out of their own pocket while you're expecting them to work away from their home. And that gets circulated for approval. And what we don't have here is the overall petty cash reconciliation, which is just generally, again, making sure that all floats that have been handed out to people are properly reconciled at all times, that you know where the money is really. And before your project ends, you know, Rudy's got a 5,000 Rand float, but Rudy's leaving tomorrow. You need to communicate with Rudy to come in, reconcile his float, so we can clear that float. Because otherwise, you know, once that person's left, with all the best of intentions, it's very hard for them to come and reconcile this thing because they're already working on another job and they're busy all day. So it's just preempting that and checking all your petty cash balances to stay on top of it.
Payroll, my forte. Where I started. I'm Nadima, one of our payroll accountants in the industry. We've been through many nightmares together. One of them, well, I guess in my world, would be one of the most important because people that don't get paid don't work. And you'll find that out quickly in the film industry. We pay on a weekly basis, and that Friday or Saturday comes around and they don't have payment, it's you'll be the first to hear about it. So it's an important cog of our industry. Like I say, we're paying on a weekly basis. So it's, depending on the size of your project, this could also be a tough job. I mean, if you could have 200 to 300 crew members on a production that you've got to pay on a weekly basis. That's timesheets flowing, work not overtime. It's a lot to take in. But if you can get, I would call it a specialized role as well within the accounting. It's not everyone that can just become a payroll accountant. You can know accounting, but there's something different about payroll. Like, yeah, you got to keep your wits about you because there's various levels of income for crew members as well. Salaries, vehicle allowances, cell phone allowances, overtime plays a big part. So you got to keep your head in this one. It's not for everyone because it is quite stressful. You've got 1 week to get it all done and make sure it gets paid. And to top it off, your producer will be on your back the next day because they want all those costs in the system as well. So it's ever active. It's a never dull moment in payroll. I enjoyed it because it was, if you can get your right systems in place, it could be rewarding. It's weird that at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, payroll accounts are excited because it's cut-off time for the bank. I've got to get my payments done. And once that 4 o'clock hits and you've done your payments, there's a bit of relief off the shoulders and you can move on with the next, thinking about the next task again. Lots to take in. I mean, you're dealing with crew on a regular basis, so that your communication is key again. Dealing with all departments because you've got to make sure that everyone's got their time sheets in on time, all contracts are signed in time. So a lot of communicating, as I said, with your whole team again. We do international payrolls as well, where international costs would come to South Africa. You have to handle their taxes. So it's again playing a part in many different sectors within the team, within the industry.
And that's the thing. You're very dependent on a lot of information flowing to you, right? From all departments. And I mean, that's something that's always filled me with dread. How do you communicate? How do you make sure? Because I've had so many people going, I didn't get paid this week. You go, did you do a timesheet? No. But you're wrong, right? You're wrong with payroll.
Why did you phone me?
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? How do you?
Well, those are the kind of systems you put in place. I mean, in my world, it would have been, I've got my full spreadsheet of my whole team. I know exactly who's where. You get a good insight in the industry here because you're knowing people by name. You might never meet them, but I know your ID. I know what you look like by your ID. I probably know your ID number as well because I've worked with you on 10 different productions before. So I know you very well, but you don't know me. You just know me as the guy that pays you. So yes, you are immersed within the production. I know who's the head of each department. I know who's getting me the timesheets. I know who's getting me the crew particulars. And that again, your communication is key there. Then your systems follow because I'm keeping my own spreadsheet to note who I received the timesheet for, and what has maybe even changed from last week. This week I see you got a timesheet, and on there is no vehicle, but I know last week you had a vehicle, or last week you had a cell phone. So I've got to keep track of those kind of things as well. Again, your systems play an important part. I was lucky that I was good at Excel. At school, we learned typing, so that was a good skill for me as well. They called me fast fingers back at work because, yeah, there's a lot of data to get in, data capturing.
And the call sheets help as well, do they? Do you have time to look at them?
I don't think you've got time for that. You're building your payroll already.
Yeah.
You're working on.
Gotcha.
You're always working a week in arrears. So
Right.
while the call sheet is happening for this week, you're still in last week. So yeah, lots to take in. A lot of management, a lot of time management, a lot of personal process management. So if you've got a head for the linear, it's a good department to be in. You'll learn a lot there.
The whole flow of accounts payable is really starting at purchase orders. Somebody wants to buy something. These days we have these online purchase order systems that has a whole approval hierarchy to run through, or flow. And, when you, in the accounts department, those purchase orders would come through to you, as I said, electronically. You would receive the supplier invoices. There are various checks to a supplier invoice. The first one would be, does it match the purchase order? I haven't received a purchase order. Where is the purchase order? Checking the detail on the invoice of whether there's a contact person to go and figure out whether that purchase order is stuck in the system somewhere. If you match the invoice to the purchase order, you have to check the invoice for compliance, whether it's compliance for VAT purposes, whether it's actually made out to the right company with the right company detail. All of those things need to be ticked. And I actually used to like accountants showing me if I needed to approve an invoice for payment that they've ticked. There's a date, there's a unique reference number, there's a VAT breakdown. And when all of that's done, those invoices get captured onto the system. The system would also say there is a purchase order for this supplier. Which one is it? Do you want to apply to it, the invoice? And capture those invoices onto the system, and then one would load the payments. I presume that happens with uploads these days to avoid any kind of typos of loading it onto the bank. And when those payments are loaded, if the supplier is not on the banking system, you'd have to add the recipient on the bank, and that also needs to go through an approval process. Once those payments are uploaded, then all those payments with backing documentation gets released by another party, not just so we have dual party releasing on the bank, one person from accounts and one person from production. I don't really like two people from accounts to do that. I don't like a person releasing their own payment to themselves, even if they're one of two people. It's all about segregation of duties. And then reconciling supplier statements is not just paying people on statement, but ticking off that if there are 10 invoices on the statement, that you have processed the 10 invoices. If there are 11 and you've only processed 10, then one needs to figure out, is there an outstanding invoice, and is it for your production? Because we see a lot of suppliers who get mixed up between all these projects, and the invoice isn't really for your production. So what damage could you do to your own production is processing that invoice and putting it through for payment, and you've just lost 100,000 Rand. So that's why it's such an important role as well, to make sure that it's the correct invoices and that you're only paying for what you ordered.
first assistant, I would say first assistant, production accountant, and financial controller, they could be, you could be one of the three, depending on the size of your project. On a small project, I might not even have a production accountant or financial controller. I could just go in with the first, and they should be able to run the whole show. The first assistant is your right-hand man of the production accountant. They would kind of be your go-to when it comes to, I think, dealing more with the outside world. The production accountant has kind of got his head stuck in the budget and reporting to producers. Your first is more dealing with crew, getting templates out, office workflow and coordination, bank recon, and dealing with SARS or the production company in terms of VAT and SARS dealings. They're then checking the work of the other assistants, the payroll and petty cash, to get all the information into the system for the production accountant. Production accountant would normally then just sign off on getting the information into the system once the first has help with uploading it. It's another important role. I mean, I would always find that the first assistant would normally even start before the production accountant in some cases, to start up the production, and then the production accountant would start a few weeks later. The first will kind of get the project set up with all the various templates that you want to use and all those kind of things. So important, but it could also flow either way depending on the size of your project. Anything else you want to add on to first assistant?
I think it's a good point about that they could start before the production accountant. Yeah. We're currently having that scenario. Though the financial controller, there's a lot of signing off on stuff and checking stuff. Everything that we've spoken about earlier, all those other disciplines eventually flows into this. And the financial controller is heavily dependent on each of those other disciplines to enable them to ensure the integrity of the numbers that are presented, right? Now, even before the production starts, they would start working on the budget. They would inherit a development budget or early stage budget from a producer, and then they would maintain that budget and update it as script changes happen, schedule changes happen. So they need to have an in-depth knowledge of what this project is all about. And based on that budget, they would also generate a cash flow, because nobody gives you all the money up front. And making sure that that cash flow is managed properly so you don't run out of money, which means you can't pay payroll, which means you're in trouble. So it's quite a responsible position. But it's basically, if you're looking at the kind of person from purely the accounting side of things, you would say it's anybody who's capable of doing accounting up to trial balance, right? You're not really dealing with revenue, as we said.
No sales.
So no sales, and you're not dealing with asset management as such. But it's really just being able to do it up to trial balance will mean you're fine of technically being able to do it, and then the rest of it is your knowledge of production, which enables you to forecast effectively. So, and that's where you get to generating the cost reports. This happens on a weekly basis. You would cut off, say, on a Friday, have your budget meeting with your producer or producers, and prepare a cost report, publish the cost report, write your story about it, and have a meeting by end of play Monday or Monday mornings or Tuesday. And that happens week after week after week. And that's why you also need to be quite a strong manager to make sure that your team is providing you with all the necessary information. Because once you're behind, there's no time to catch up. It doesn't happen. I've never seen anybody catch up. Yeah. No matter how many hours you put in. Yeah. It's too fast-paced. And you would be in very early, with or after the first assistant accountant, and then you would pretty much what we call wrap out the show at the end of it and hand it over either to the great production companies, or if it's an independent, you'd pretty much sit with it until you're done until you've killed the project, which is a happy day to all of us when that company is no longer active. And that's the role. You're a head of department. You're constantly engaging with all the other departments. And again, your door needs to be open, and you also need to be willing to get up and go and see people. Are you happy? Me happy?
Well, I guess either way. I mean, this was a slide that we set up to show you what your next steps could be to get your foot into this industry, if you're not already. The South African Film Academy does a lot of work in this regard. And they have tuned out a lot of successful accountants before, I believe. So that would be our first step to get you into an internship. I've got, how many interns do we have here, actually? Nice. So these are guys that are on their way to becoming accountants, hopefully in film for my guys. And that's a good place to start, an internship where you can kind of I can tell you about our guys. We've got three lovely ladies that joined us in our accounts department. I don't think they had any interest in film neither, but we didn't know about film. We found them based on their accounting knowledge, and we'll see if we can make some more film accountants from the three of them. It's a nice journey to be on. I mean, something different to corporate accounting. But the internship was a good step for them to kind of make that work for the next year. They'll be with us to see what they can learn.
Hi, I'm Anati. I'm a production accountant. I wanted to find out, do you guys think, when we look at the industry and all the movies that have been made, it has been the cycle of the same accountants. Do you think that, are we working hard to make sure that the next generation of accountants is there? And then also, can we touch on the rebate and the importance of the production accountant?
Oh, we dreaded that question about the rebate, didn't we?
I'm surprised that you're here, Nati. I mean, this is one of the production accountants on a few of the productions I worked on. Can you tell us what you're here for, Nati? Can you tell us what you're here for? Like, what brings you here?
I got the invitation. I saw it on my emails, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. I would like to find out about it. But I was within the film program when I started. I didn't study accounting. I studied film. And then I decided, let me start accounting so I can be like a good producer. But it has stuck onto me, so now I'm like, production accountant, I think.
Okay, so Anati, when we open up our applications in the beginning of the year, right? We go to the various institutions. I'm sure you guys have seen it. We put it out there, right? And then the people apply. Now, the weird thing is, literally nobody shows interest in joining the accounts department. This could be ignorance, that they didn't know that this is a career opportunity, but this is why, especially this year in particular, in fact, this was their idea to help to mitigate this issue, to have a masterclass so that people can get the information so that they can make informed decisions. And then the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that accounting, generally speaking, if you have a degree or a master's or an honors, you can generally find work quite comfortably. And the film industry, it's a lot of freelance work. So if people are at home for like 2 months, they usually just go right back to their industry. So we are putting in efforts, these master classes, reaching out to the universities, but we can only wait for people to come to us. So holla at us accountants.
Sorry, that answers half your question, Anati. The other half was with reference to the DTI rebate, but I just want to touch on it not from the point of view of the horrors about the rebate in terms of what it is or isn't actually doing, but perhaps you could just touch on the notion of an SPV and explain how important it is what you're doing as a film production accountant, that it begins at a critical point and that at the end of that, in order to qualify for the rebate, whether or not it results, it really is on your lap as the accountant.
Wow, that's loaded. DTI rebates. I mean, let's first start with every production that we set up has got its own SPV, its own company. Everything for that production is run for that company, and it's only for that purpose. When we talk about DTI rebates, part of our attraction, or part of the attraction globally is that most countries would have a rebate of some sort, where a company would come into the country, spend money, and they'll get a certain portion of that money back via a rebate. We did have a reliable rebate many moons ago. It would give you back a cap of 50 million rand on your production spend, 25% of it. It has now been reduced to 25 million, which has made us a little bit less attractive to the other countries, because there's still countries in the world that are doing 40% rebates with no caps. So we're fighting hard to kind of make up for that loss. What's not helping with that is that the DTI is very unreliable at the moment. We haven't had a DTI meeting. We normally have a DTI meeting once a month on the last Thursday of each month. We haven't had one since March of this year, which is unprecedented. Doesn't leave me with lots of comfort. I can't even say if there is clear sight as to whether this will change in the near future. We kind of hope and see. It is having a negative effect that their clients are choosing other locations where they can get more for their money. But it is something that we are working on. Anati, I can't remember, what was your question in relation to the DTI rebate?
When it comes to the DTI and the rebate itself in working with the producer.
Funny enough, we are busy working on a DTI rebate at the moment, aren't we? The two of us. So yes, it's very important because the DTI has certain requirements that it needs all production to cover. You need to have the correct BE levels for your service company, Film Africa or Moonlighting, and for this SPV must also meet certain BE requirements. Like your accountant is playing a big role in that in terms of tracking donations, tracking spend with certain vendors. The accountant and the payroll then playing an important part of reporting to the DTI. At the end of the project, DTI wants to see everything that you spent, bank statements and the works. They want to see payroll reports. They want to see vendors, information about certain vendors. So that account department is playing an important role in making sure the documentation is there at the end. Without that documentation, you ain't getting no money. You will not get your rebate. So your client is extremely dependent on that, especially for the smaller projects. The smaller projects, for our bigger projects, the Mad Maxes and the Tomb Raiders, those are mega production shows. We see those shows as their rebate is like a bonus for them. They've got deep enough pockets. It's a little chip in their budget. But when we look at the smaller project, these guys are making that film with that DTI rebate in mind. Without that rebate, they're not making anything. So it becomes a bit more important for the smaller guys. Bigger guys, a bit of a bonus, but important for our industry on the whole to have a reliable rebate. We're working on that, and hopefully we can turn that around soon.
Yes.
Yeah, hoping.
But I do think in all those disciplines that we touched on, even starting with filing, is that the accounts department needs to work towards, they know that there's going to be a full audit of the entire project. So that's why even from filing, it is so critically important that that portfolio of evidence is complete. You know, the SPVs, the special purpose vehicles, it's like approaching it the same way you would do at a broadcaster or a studio where the DTI might not be part of that production at all, is you would still register a special purpose vehicle because you need to ring fence the flow of funding and expenditure, and you would still do an audit. We have projects that get audited again 5 years after completion, 6 years after the completion. So that's why it's so critical that your production accounts team has everything on record and delivers all of that. It's a critical part of their delivery, because 5 years down the line we can just give access to those files and there you go, audit it again. With regards to the film incentive, I think there's a general misunderstanding about what the objective of it is, maybe from some of our friends in government, because there's currently 115 incentives globally. The objective of all these incentives is to attract investment in the film sector, because governments and states know that by attracting investment, you see economic growth and you see job creation and growth in critical infrastructure, etc., etc. So the benefits are there, and these things are making governments money instead of costing them money. It's not a subsidy kind of approach to it, but Lyndon will fix it for us.
I'm working on it.
But also just bear in mind that this is based on what's called QSAP, or Qualifying South African Expenditure. The money doesn't go to the production or servicing company. They don't benefit from it. It goes to the people that come into the country as an inducement to try and get them to come back, or to come and do other productions here. So it's absolutely critical to our survival as an industry, and there's no question about that.
Hi there. Okay, let's stand.
I've love a name and a what you're doing here.
Yeah, my name is Tsika, and I'm a camera trainee at the moment. So I'm not in the whole accounting situation, and you kept throwing around, what's this, DTI, rebates and so forth. Can you just explain that to me? Like just a quick breakdown of it? Because you just kept throwing all those big terminologies out there, so I got a bit lost, I'm not going to lie.
Well, if we go further, one step back, DTI is a government, it's basically government, Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. So a government department that helps South Africa with their trade. As we mentioned, there's 115. There's 115 different rebates similar to ours globally. So it's nothing new to the world. You come into the country, you spend your money, and you'll get a certain portion of the money back in a rebate. So at the moment, it's sitting at 25% for features. It can go up to 30% for our international features. For your South Africans, you could go up to 40% of your South African spend back in rebate. Both capped at 25 million rand.
Yeah. And these incentives are also not just film specific. There are incentives in motoring, mining, business process outsourcing, call centers kind of businesses. So it's a general tool used by governments to activate economic growth.
My name is Kala. I'm an intern, right?
Intern doing?
Huh?
What are you doing as an intern?
So it's a freelance intern thingy. Like, there's a lot of things happening here, you know?
Sound like a producer.
Yeah. So my question is, like, let me just move this thing real quick. My question is, like, what advice would you give to, like, an emerging producer, right? In terms of, like, wanting to go independent, especially starting, like, the special purpose vehicle that you talked about. Like, when is the best time to start it? Let's say you have a project in development, no funds committed yet, right? So, like, when is the best time to start, like, the special purpose vehicle?
I'll give you a quick one.
Yeah.
You've got your project.
Yeah?
You've got your funding.
No funds committed yet.
No, there we go.
You're still.
Those will be the first two for me. I mean, Rudy can expand on. For me, you've got your project. You know what you want to do. The money's important. Money makes the world go round. So there's no point in starting the SPV if you've got no money and then no finance plan that goes with it. So that'll be my tip for you.
Okay.
I second that. But it also, you need to, with your project, and when you talk about funding is, when you're speaking to the funders, you'll get a clear idea of what the timeline is. To set up a company takes, 10 days?
Yeah, not long.
But just to be cautious.
Let's say within a month you can get it.
Yeah, so let's say you need a month to have it up and running and set up. If you're talking to various film funds or private investors who want to fund your project, you'll need to have that business plan in place, that producer's business plan of this is my project, these are the participants, this is the budget for it, what it's going to look like, and this is the distribution plan for it. So you need a business plan like with any other industry. Once you have that in place, then you can register the company. I wouldn't register a company without having any plan for it, because it's just going to cost you money to keep it running. But yes, I mean, when you're ready to pull the trigger on funding is when you would do it. If you're applying for a fund, for example, a development fund or something like at the NFVF, they will read the application form. If it asks you for a company, that's when you need to decide if you're going to establish that company or not. The instructions don't help. Reading the application form actually helps.
Hi, I'm Casper. I'm an writing trainee. I have two questions. Firstly, you keep mentioning that you keep VAT separate. Is that to do with rebates and how everything gets taxed? Or is it, what's the reason for that?
I can take that.
By all means.
I had to explain that to my wife the other day. Okay, so the whispering function doesn't work, does it? No, happy to answer that. That's got nothing to do with DTI rebates. VAT is value-added tax levied at 15%, right? So if something costs 100 Rand, then SARS wants 15% of that. If you are doing company...
Sorry, correction there. If it costs 100 Rand, SARS are going to add 15%.
Yeah, they add. So sorry, you pay 115 Rand, where it actually only costs you 100, should be costing you 100 Rand. But that's my own personal issue with SARS. But, so if you have a here's the thing, Film Africa is VAT registered. Moonlighting is VAT registered. I buy from Moonlighting. Moonlighting charges me 115 Rand. Moonlighting pays, for a service rendered, Moonlighting pays SARS the 15 Rand as output VAT. I have the invoice from Moonlighting of 115 Rand. There's 100 Rand cost for the service and 15 Rand VAT. We call that input VAT. I show that to SARS. SARS refunds me 15%. Where does SARS makes money is when I'm not VAT registered and I buy from Moonlighting. Then Moonlighting pays the 15 Rand over to SARS. I can't claim the 15 Rand back.
My other question is to do with our corporate and service industry. And I remember from film school that we were told that international productions tend to work on the dollar. Could you translate, especially because when we see big blockbuster films, we see $350 million was spent making it. Could you just break down how much these independent projects tend to actually cost in terms of rands and in terms of US dollars?
Relato?
I can give an example. I tell you what.
I'm checking the screen now to see if I can give you an example.
Yeah, Dark Tide cost $11 million back in 2011. You didn't hear it from me. But I would tell you generally, what's the dollar to the Rand now? About 17 Rand 60 or something, right? So generally, if you look at a project and it's filming entirely in South Africa, and I think Dark Tide was about a 6 or 7 week shoot, up to 50% of the total budget spent in South Africa. So if you're saying you've got a 300, make it small sums, please. My head's aching.
100,000.
Let's say you've got a $100,000 film, right? That's 17.5 million Rand in total. Up to half of that was spent in South Africa. Depends on who your cast members are. Who are your international cast members, how much they cost, where post-production happens. If it happens in South Africa, then that percentage goes up. If of spend locally, if post-production happens offshore, then... So that's the kind of balance of it.
To give you an idea, in rands, our bigger productions are around 200 million. Between 200 and all the way up to probably $1 billion we could squeeze on the bigger ones. Just to add on to your VAT question, what's nice, well, I shouldn't say nice, but interesting about the film industry, there are no sales in the film industry in South Africa. So when I'm making a movie here, I'm getting money in from internationally. That's not a sale, that's production funding. SARS takes none of that funds in that 15% that Rudy mentioned for VAT. So what's happening on our side is we've only got expenses. Our SPV is VAT registered. We've only got expenses with SARS, and we're claiming that VAT back on a monthly basis then. SARS doesn't like us much for that, but yeah, we squeeze a lot of money out of them for VAT then, because we have no sales. So.
But they understand they're doing those VAT refunds because of the foreign investment coming in.
Yeah.
Me again. Just a quick question. So, like, let's say you get funding for a movie, right? What happens if you go over budget from your point, like, perspective?
Out of your pocket, bud.
Straight. And then if you can't afford it, is it just jail time?
No, it depends on your relationship with your producers, I guess. Huh?
Okay.
Yes, that's where business affairs department comes in. You will have a lot of contracts and you will have a level of responsibility for that money, which generally states that if you don't, it's back to communication, if you don't have overspent pre-approved, it comes out of your pocket. You're responsible for it. So that's why the weekly cost report meetings are so important. There are certain instances where the funder would say, and this could be any funder could say, or investor could say, listen, I know you only allowed for 100 Rand for an actor, but I want this actor who's costing 200 Rand. And you would go, well, it will take me over budget. And then you both agree that's fine, you can go over budget because they'll give more money. But if you go and make that decision without your investors' knowledge, then they're going to go, you have to find the difference.
It's not hugely different to petty cash. If you don't provide a petty cash slip, then it's going to come out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So that's
just a small scale of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, once again.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So I just wanted to ask this. I know, like, for you guys are doing accounting, right? Production accounting and stuff like that. But, like, I always wondered, like, how does Moonlighting and Film Africa bring in, like, foreign investment? Because, like, you know, working independently, you know, you're always on the challenge of, like, raising money and stuff like that, and, you know, and asking for grants all the time, private investments all the time, you know. And I was, like, thinking, man, like, production service actually seems like, you know, it is, like, it's booming this side, especially in Cape Town. So, like, what's, like, the template of, like, getting into, like, production service, especially for, like, international people?
That is a great question. Can I go?
Go for it.
You pound the pavements. You walk and you walk and you walk. It was, from my personal experience, was living abroad, completely unplanned, did give me access, or I built up a network of people there, you know, because the industry moves around a lot because of the freelance nature of it. Is why, what did you say about stepping on toes? That network expands quite quickly. But in a business, you need to continue with that. I can give you an example that last Tuesday, a Canadian producer had his birthday. I still used old school Facebook and congratulated him on his birthday. And Saturday he emailed me that a producer colleague of his was coming to South Africa. So it's keeping your networks going on all platforms. It's become easier rather than more difficult, because historically it was you get on a plane and you travel. It's costly, it's very expensive, but you have to set aside some of your business's allowance for a marketing budget. The DTI supports outward, they have an outward marketing support scheme thing. It's got some acronym. They've been very effective with that over the years, which allows you to attend film festivals and markets. The only thing is, that's the loneliest place on earth when you haven't booked up your calendar with meetings beforehand. And it's getting your foot into that door, which is very challenging. But that's just ongoing. If people don't hear your voice, you don't exist. You have to have an ongoing campaign of reaching out to people, using social networks, whatever you can.
Yeah. And then, as you mentioned earlier, your reputation is very important. When we look at a lot of those films are repeat clients that came back to us. So the Paramounts and the Sonys, Warner Brothers, they love South Africa. And they're often chop and change between the two of us, depending on, I guess, who the producer is. So did Rudy know the producer? Good chance he'll get the show. So yes, again, about you got to protect your own name, man.
Hello, my name is Chado, and well, I'm not doing anything with within the entertainment industry. I'm more into IT, but I am very much interested in it. But I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's really for you because it's not really about mainly accounting. It's like more theoretical, and it's not political, but you know, around about the. I watch a lot of movies, like a lot, from Hollywood, sometimes Bollywood and Nollywood, and you know, I don't
Thank
know.
you.
Is it Chollywood, Chinese? But whatever they call that. But I've always, it's, there's a difference in levels when it comes to the quality and quantity in movies when you watch from overseas and when you watch movies from here. Like, we don't have as much science fiction, we don't have as much, you know, genres as, you know, when you watch from outside. And sometimes I'm like, I'd love to watch something that's of that nature here. And I was wondering, why is it that, like, why is there such a big difference? Why do you think, maybe from an accounting point of view or from a person who's been in the industry, why do you think that it's so hard or it's not as widely, you know, done here and as the quantity and quality as it should, you know, or as I think it should be?
Well, firstly, let me tell you that there is a lot being made here. Everything that you see here is made here. I mean, Avengers is the only one. I think we only shot 2 weeks on Avengers, and you would never know that.
Yeah, it's like I know, I get the point that like a lot of scenes and a lot of
Yeah,
movies are done here, but it doesn't really feel South African. They never feel like, you know, yeah, they're not South African. They don't feel like they for us.
I'm with you.
You know, they don't feel like they don't connect with us. You watch it and you're like, oh, and you like, they tell you, this was made here, and you're always shocked. You're never like, I'd love to see Menzi whatever, you know, doing something here. And you always get excited to see a South African actor that you know in a movie, and you're like, that might actually have been made here. And it's, you know, that's what I'm saying. Because when you watch Chinese or Nigerian or movies that are about science or about, or they go back to the past or whatever, but it's
Special effects, you mean?
yeah, you know, you always see the culture, and you always see the authenticity of the country and the pride that comes with representing your country. And I'm like, I never really see enough South Africans or Southern African movies that do that. And I'm like, why is that? So, yeah.
I think she's talking about IP more than anything else, and like Devil's Peak, for argument's sake, those kind of productions.
Yeah. Well, I think we don't need you in IT. We need you in storytelling. That's our first problem. We need some more South African storytellers to make the content.
So the problem is the content's not.
Exactly. I mean, these guys are bringing their content down. They're saying, I've got the content. I've got like your colleague over there. He's got a storyline. I'm sure he's got a lovely story. So he needs to then go and find the finance to fit his to meet his story and then make that. And I must say there is a lot of South African content out there. I just don't think that we don't have access to it on our television shows that much. I mean, we've got another part of our group is known associates, and they only do South African films. And a lot of them. We're doing about 12 a year sometimes. So there's a lot that can be seen. It's just about where do we see it. When you go to the cinema, and there's 12 films there, how often are you choosing the South African one? And how often are you choosing the international to watch?
And I think also don't get too regional in when you're looking at what's going on, because there's a lot happening, for example, in Gauteng, and we're not trying to chase you away and suggest you go there, but it's not just the Western Cape where there's a film industry. There's a massive local film industry up north. I mean, and I'm thinking about known associates as well.
Go for it.
Thank you.
On Zoom.
I think, you know, it's film business People forget about the business side of it. Traditionally, and I'm excited to see it changing, and I can tell you why it's changing, is because the traditional markets are saturated, which means in a world of streamers, fully subscribed. North America is fully subscribed. Western Europe, fully subscribed. So now the streamers and those studios are looking for new audiences to expand into. And you can see in the last 5 years how that has changed. So that it's not a cynical approach, it's just pure business for a streamer. Streamer is not making seats out of movie tickets being sold, it's making seats out of subscriptions. If South Africa is fully subscribed to a streamer, it needs to find another territory to get more subscriptions in. So you will see, I've been delighted to see how it has changed, that, you know, you have more South African content, and I would agree with lack of quantity, but the quality is spectacular. The quality is really impressive of the local IP projects that we see here. So I think it'll change. Nigeria also, and China, for example, and India, you will have more local projects there. You have a bigger audience. So there's more money per capita, more money per head to pay for those projects.
And I think also you'll know that you know, companies like Gambit Films, the two owner directors of whom came through our program inadvertently, but they're producing an amazing local content. Blood and Water has gone to its 4th season. That's South African, doesn't get more South African than that.
As a gents, my name is Alex. I'm part of the camera and lighting program with Beyond Your Entertainment. On the side, I'm also a lighting assistant in the production field. I also want to be a screenwriter and director. My question is just with regards to when you conceptualize your budget in that phase, because I imagine obviously you're speaking to your client, right? And you're developing a budget and you're proposing it to them. Now, where is the train of thought in terms of within that, let's say 100,000 Rand, we're allocating 30,000 towards gear, right? But at this stage, you haven't met with Panavision, your cinematographer hasn't chosen his gear or anything like that. So where does that thought process like come from? You know, why am I thinking, okay, I need 30,000, you know? Because obviously gear ranges and crew prices ranges from, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio to a other guy. So just that kind of train of thought, where is it coming from?
I can start this one. I mean, on our side, we've got, look, keep in mind, we're only covering the South African cost. So when Leonardo comes down, that's not part of my budget. That will be paid by the international. So on our side, we've got a template for what a week will cost, what a day would cost. So it's easy to then say, you're coming to me with 100,000 Rand, you've got 3 shooting days, boom, boom, boom. Here's my template for a day. So I can easily tell you what it's going to cost you. Depending on what you want to do, maybe we say you've got a drama might be different to an action or to a sci-fi. So there'll be a certain template for those kind of films as well that I have to then add a bit more to my budget for a sci-fi maybe. But the general template is the same. If I'm gonna have a certain amount of crew, I know plus minus what the average rate is for those crew members, and I can start building my budget that way.
From a budgeting point of view, there's nothing new. It's been done before, without sounding harsh. But yes, those are the templates that's happened. You can compare, you can quite easily just, even if you don't have those analytical data, you can quite easily just go and compare it with a similar project, you know, and figure out what that would cost.